Hello and welcome. The topic today is new research, new evidence that confirms what we know, many of us know, the wellness champions know, is that infection is the biggest cause of multiple sclerosis. And this exciting new research that I'm sharing with you is literally hot off the press, and it confirms what we know. And that is so important because the more research that comes out, that will help our healthcare providers and our standard of care to catch up to truly what will help us recover, not just from multiple sclerosis, but also from all chronic disease. Hello, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And I'm helping a lot of people recover from chronic disease, educating us, teaching us how to be the director of our health, how to take charge of our health so that we can live an amazing life. And if you haven't met me before, thank you so much for all the love. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was just 28 years old. And I was told at that time there was no hope for me. This was a long time ago. And what I'm going to be sharing with you, the research that's just hot off the press, has truly confirmed what these hero doctors knew 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, they knew that fungal overgrowth was a really big part of chronic disease. But now, because we have really good researchers, I think that's the biggest thing. And we have a better way of measuring these types of infections in our central nervous system. So I'm going to go right to the study. So the study, it was published very recently at the end of May in the Neurology of Disease journal. So it's a peer-reviewed journal, Neurology of Disease. And the title would be Multiple Sclerosis and Mixed Microbial Infections, Direct Identification of Fungi and Bacteria in Nervous Tissue. So I'm going to share a little bit of insights that I have on my page here, just to summarize for you. I have put together a resource for you that contains a ton of studies. So it's really important. I'm going to put this in perspective for today. So today we're going to be talking about this study that shows fungal overgrowth in the brains. We know that they've already found it in our central nervous system, but now in the brain tissue inside our nerve cells, like even in our nucleus of our nerve cells. But it's important to put this in perspective because it's not just fungus that's causing chronic disease. We know that there are many bacterial infections, including some of the Lyme type diseases. We know that also parasites are a really big part. So if you have been following me, you know this, but if you're new to following any of the teaching that I do, please go back to some of the videos on YouTube, Live Disease Free, or on our Facebook, Live Disease Free page. And you're going to find a lot of replays. And there's a 6-part series that I did on infections. So this is going to be really confirming more evidence for the fungus part, but we do know that parasites play a really big role in chronic disease. We have a lot of symptom improvement in our students when they treat parasites, but yes, fungus is super important too, and bacteria. So that is really when we're dealing with ALS, Parkinson's, MS, the really serious chronic diseases, we have to understand that we're dealing with multiple infections. And today we're going to be just talking about fungus mainly, and a little bit of bacteria they've also found, which is very significant. But as far as the infections, if you would like a beautiful resource that I created for you, you go to my website, livediseasefree.com, livediseasefree.com, and then you do /MS-infections. MS as in multiple sclerosis -infections. When you go to that resource, you're going to see that there are many studies that have shown that we have many types of infections when we're dealing with MS. So this would be true for other infections, but I've just put this together for MS. I'll be adding this research to that page also. Please share that with other people. Share it with your doctors. Share it with people in your life that are dealing not just with MS, but with chronic disease, so that they can see that with MS, there's infections, but it's true for all other chronic disease also. And it really depends on the level of infection in our body. When we have a tremendous amount of infection in our body, then we have a more serious disease like the ALS, Parkinson's, MS. It's kind of down the road of chronic disease. And maybe when we're just feeling, you know, tired, and we might feel fluey, and we might have just minor things like digestive issues and fatigue and not sleeping well, then we are out of balance with our microbes, but not as far along as these really serious chronic diseases like I had multiple sclerosis. And I learned how to treat those infections, how to get them back down, back under control. We can't totally sterilize our body from these different types of microbes, but if you lower them enough, you will find that you will recover, that your disease progression stops, you don't need meds anymore, and then and like I said, don't stop your meds, make sure you work with your doctor, but when you recover, you don't need medications anymore. And then you live the very best life, and that's what I've been able to do for the past 28 years, and it's been so exciting. So I'm going to share with you the study that I'm sharing with you today. This is not their first study. Their first study was in 2008, and in 2008 they actually discovered a relationship between fungal infections and multiple sclerosis. So they found that people that have MS, that 6 out of 7 in their study, they had fungal DNA in their blood. So they found out that the MS patients that they studied, they did have symptoms of fungal overgrowth, but they found fungal DNA in 6 out of the 7 patients that they studied. They also found fungus in the central nervous system of the MS patients also. So in that first study in 2008, they concluded that number one, either fungus is part of the problem of what's causing MS, it's one of the infections that's causing MS, or maybe it's that whatever's causing MS, it suppresses our immune system, and then fungus starts to grow in our central nervous system. I honestly believe it's number one, is that fungus is one of the big players in the cause of multiple sclerosis. What's really important before we go any further is to understand that our central nervous system is not a sterile environment. That we know, and probably just in the last few years, researchers, scientists have come to determine and come to know that in our central nervous system, there are bacteria, there are fungi, there's all kinds of different microbes. It has its own ecosystem. Like I say, in our intestines, we have an ecosystem of microbes, but also in our central nervous system, we also have another ecosystem. And so that ecosystem can get out of balance sometimes. And why we have not looked at infection before, why we have this mysterious autoimmune and we have no idea what's causing it. Thank you so much for all the love that you guys are sharing. Please interact with me, because all I'm looking at is this little green dot on my computer. And it's really nice to see you guys can hear me and you get it and you understand. Please also type in your comments. Even if you're listening to the replay, type in your comments, because we will be answering them as we're finishing. Right now, I don't have these links posted in the feed under this video, but check back within a half an hour after. They will be all posted as soon as we're done. So we have to understand that the central nervous system does contain microbes. That's in a healthy, normal person. All right, there's different types of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes that are living there. And so when we have, for example, when we go on a lot of antibiotics, as I've shared, then we end up with dysbiosis. We're out of balance in our gut. Now the scientists are talking about dysbiosis in our central nervous system, being out of balance, having too many bad microbes and not enough good microbes. So for example, the healthy control people in the studies, they might have a tiny little bit of certain types of fungi that are maybe not as pathogenic in humans, but they're finding that in people that have MS, that there are much higher amounts, and certain ones are found in the MS samples that they studied versus they are not present in the controls. So back in 2008, they were already making the link between MS and fungus in their studies. They then did another study in 2013, same research team, and they found again that they found fungus in the central nervous system of patients that have multiple sclerosis. Now the exciting part is that just in 2018, the end of May, I believe it was published, and so just beginning of June, so really hot off the press, they have found, and I'm just going to read this to you because it's very, very significant. So this study is the first evidence where they have found fungal infections in the brains of people that have died of multiple sclerosis. So obviously they had to look at brain bank samples of people that had multiple sclerosis, confirmed diagnosis, and they compared this to controls of people that did not have MS, and you'll find these results really interesting. So they did notice that there were different types of species that were detected, so different types of fungi and microbes that were detected, but specifically there's one, Trichosporin mucoides, so I'll just call it TM, a big name for it, but I'll be sharing all of this with you later if you want the name of it. Please share this with your neurologist, please share this with your doctors, and they may not believe just one piece of evidence, but when you keep sharing and sharing, share the my livediseasefree.com/MS-infection, so the Live Disease Free website, and then at the end put /MS-infections. There's a ton more studies there, many, many studies. So they found this TM fungus in 8 out of the 10 MS patients, and it was really high, it's like super high in 2 of them. And this fungus was not present in any of the controls. Very important. So when they do these studies, they take a group of people that have multiple sclerosis and they take another group of people that do not have multiple sclerosis. And so they're called the controls. And so they found in 8 out of 10 significant amounts of this TM fungus, and in the controls, none. In their brains, when they looked at the tissue of the brains of the MS patients and of the people that had no multiple sclerosis. And in addition to the brain tissue, the MS patients also tested positive for certain bacteria. And the significance of this is that these bacteria, so this is bacteria inside the brain tissue of people that have multiple sclerosis, not just inside the brain tissue, but inside the nerve cells. And not just inside the nerve cells, but inside the nucleus of the nerve cells. That is not a good thing. So they're finding fungus inside the nerve cells, inside the nucleus, so that's where the DNA of the neuron is. So there's fungus and bacteria inside the nucleus, which contains the DNA for the nerve. That is not a good thing. So that's really, really significant. So there were 2 types of fungus that were more prevalent in the MS and not present at all in one of them. The TM was not present at all in any of the controls. The other one was, but to a much lesser degree, and not present inside the nucleus of the cells, right? The center is kind of like the heart, where all the DNA, the genetic material, that is like the blueprint of how the cell is going to copy itself and make new cells. So you can see that it is very significant when you find this fungal growth. So they found not just the DNA of fungus, but they also found structures of fungus inside the nerve cells in our brain, that people that have MS. So on some of my previous videos, I've shared with you that fungus, when it is non-disease causing, it's like a little seed. It's a little bit round. And we have some in our intestines. If we were really healthy, we would have a plethora of many different types of microbes in our intestines. And we would just have a few little seeds of, let's say, Candida, but there's many other types of fungus. But what happens is when we go on antibiotics or something in our environment really disrupts our ecosystem, it wipes out the good microbes, it does not touch the little seeds of the fungus, and it starts to sprout. And it starts to grow this root structure called hypha. And they actually found hypha and chitin, which is a very strong external part that gives it, it's part of its defense mechanism and makes it really hardy and hard to treat. But so there's different structures of fungus that they're finding inside the nerve cells and inside the nucleus of the nerve cells. Really huge. And sometimes these structures are going across the membrane of the nerve cell. So so with this study, like if you're a science geek like I am, you can actually see, and there was some Candida growing, but there was more of this Trichosporin mucoides present inside the MS patients in their brains. That was the most significant one, really, really huge. So in the study, they had 10 patients with multiple sclerosis and 12 controls that they studied. And again, 8 out of 10 of this people that had multiple sclerosis that had died of this is from a brain bank. 8 out of 10 of them, they tested positive, significant amounts of this TM fungus present in their brains. And only 1 out of 12 in the people that were the controls that did not have the chronic disease. Really, really, really significant. So then what they did is they looked at the brains, actually before in their previous research, they looked at the brains of Alzheimer's patients. And they did find that there was no TM, so that trichosporin, so let me get the name of it. So it's trichosporin mucoides, trichosporin mucoides. So TM, I'll just call it TM. So in the past, they had looked at the brains of 10 Alzheimer's patients, and they found no TM there. And they also did not find, and in this study, they did not find this TM in the nervous system of, or the brains, I should say, of the Alzheimer's or ALS also, in previous studies and in this current study. So because they're finding specific types of fungus in specific types of neurological diseases, so they found fungus in the other diseases, but not the same types of fungus as in MS. So they hypothesized that because of the different types of disease, it just has to do with different types of fungal infections in the brains of MS versus ALS versus Alzheimer's disease. And so that is not 100% conclusive yet, but we should not have fungus growing in our brain and in our brain cells, in our nerve cells in our brain. Very, very significant. Huge, huge finding. And what's so neat is they carried it across a few other diseases. So the TM was not found in Alzheimer's, it was not found in ALS, but it was only found in MS. So this might be one of the fungi that are making us sick with the MS symptoms if you're dealing with multiple sclerosis. So once again, it's very important to understand that fungus is a big player in chronic disease, for sure. And there are at least 400 different types of species that can infect us, that are fungi that can make us sick, can make humans sick. So this is just really understanding that there is specifically one fungus, this TM fungus, that is probably one of the culprits. But if you go back and watch the series that I have, the multiple sclerosis and infections, there's 5 or 6 parts. And if you go back and go through that, you're going to see that there is very significant new research in the last year and a half. I should say 2014, so I guess that's more than a year and a half. But most people don't know about it. But they're also finding nematodes in the central nervous system of people with multiple sclerosis. All of them, 10 out of 10. What's really significant is if we have parasitic infections, they, like for example, the little tiny nematodes, which are little tiny parasitic worms, they're about the size of a pen dot. That's how tiny they are. But they carry their own microbes inside of them. So they carry Lyme disease, they can carry fungus. So it's interesting, it's like, why do the MS patients just have this one type of fungus growing? Is there some other microbe that is bringing it into our system? That's something that, requires further study. But I also want you to think of this, is that it starts in the gut. Disease always starts in the gut. So we go on too many antibiotics, as I mentioned before, and then we're out of balance with our good microbes. We have too many bad and not enough good microbes. And so now our good microbes, or our immune system, can no longer defend us because it's an unfair fight and it's just too much. They're overwhelmed. And then we get immune dysfunction. But if our immune system can't keep up with the infections, can't keep up with the dysbiosis that we have, how out of balance we are, these bad microbes, they spill into our blood. And that is from the leaky gut, from the damage, and I've done videos on that before, so go back and watch them. So when you have a lot of inflammation and war going on with these infections, we have leaky gut. The infections spill into our blood, over time become more concentrated in our blood. I've shared lots of research on how we can have, things like Babesia infecting our red blood cells and other types of microbes. We have the Borrelia, which they also studied in this study also, and they did find the DNA of Borrelia also, which is Lyme disease. It's the spirochete that's associated with Lyme disease. So these microbes spill into our blood, and so we can feel like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and then eventually they spill into our central nervous system. They work their way in. And so that's really important to understand. It's not like your whole body's healthy and it's just sitting in your central nervous system. It's that you got to treat the gut first, right? And that's what we help people to do, is we help them to have a game plan, to understand the strategy necessary, because, and you can't focus on treating Lyme, and you have to treat the big microbes first. And, you know, if you have a bunch of big nematodes bigger than the fungus, you have to treat them first. But you have to understand how important fungus is. It really suppresses our immune system. That's a really big factor. It's a really big factor with cancer, with diabetes, with all chronic disease. So I hope that you share this research with your healthcare providers. It is so sad, but it is my students that are training up their doctors. And some of them are open and some of them are not. And if they're not, then you have to find somebody that is. And also the integrative healthcare providers, we're sharing research with them. We're sharing the symptoms with them. We're giving them protocols that work to treat these parasites and fungus, etc. And so this is pioneer work, groundbreaking work, but honestly, the only way to get your health and your life back is you have to take control of your health. You have to be the director of your health. You have to understand this, because it's your life, and you cannot wait for years and years and years until this is mainstream and until this is standard of care. I'm going to run over to your questions for a minute and see what you have to ask me here. Hello, Dana and Oksana and Rob. Hello, Oksana and Henny, Elizabeth, Lakey, Lori, hi. And Susan and Valerie, see if you guys have any questions. And Colleen and Leah, hello. Marilyn, hello, Rachel, and Tammy, and Debbie, and Piotr. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but it sounds very beautiful. Jenny, Doris. All right, so Doris. Hi, Pam. Does shingles have anything to do with immune and fungus? So shingles, from what I understand, is there could be a virus involved with it. But remember that in my experience, in my humble experience working with hundreds of people with chronic disease, is that the only people that would have problems with viruses are people that have a suppressed immune system. So what suppresses our immune system? Having this dysbiosis. When our immune system is so busy trying to deal with the fungus, which is always an issue when we're out of balance, and then possible different types of parasites, absolutely. So you have to treat those things first, the parasites, the fungus, possible bacterial infections also, and then you will find that your body will deal with, if it is a virus, which I believe that that's what they believe it is, it will deal with it and you won't have that issue. You go back and you think about in high school, the people that had mono, right? There are some people that got it and some people didn't. That is a type of virus. And those people, those high school students, are the people that have their immune system is really suppressed. And it's usually the biggest part of the suppression has to do with microbes being out of balance. Too many bad microbes and not enough. And those are the same people that will get the bacterial infections. So the strep throat and the bronchitis and the bladder infections and all those other infections, those acute bacterial infections, they come when our immune system just can't clear those infections well. So as you treat, as you correct your microbiota, your ecosystem inside of your body, and it's mostly in the gut, but other parts, your central nervous system, your mouth, nose, throat, parts of the urinary and reproductive tract, but the biggest part is your GI tract. That's where most of the microbes sit. We carry at least 2 to 3 pounds of microbes in our intestines. It's like a huge ecosystem. There are more cells of microbes that live inside our gut than in our entire body, than the cells of our body. They outnumber the cells of our body 10 to 1. So we're literally a shell carrying these microbes. So we have to understand that they really impact us in health and chronic disease. So yes, as you correct your microbiome, Doris, you will find you will not be susceptible, that shingles will clear up. And there's certain things you can take, natural supplements to help with shingles also, but you'll find that you can't just treat shingles, you have to look at the big picture. You've never heard this information before, Rob? I am so sorry, because this information, I was shown that MS is caused by infection 28 years ago when I was first diagnosed. I read books, 4 different books by medically trained doctors that were already treating, and at that time they thought it was mostly just fungus. They thought it was candida. But because I followed a different path, because I took a different path and I treated infection, but now we've learned so much more that parasites are a really big part, and also the Borrelia, the Lyme disease. There's many different vector-borne infections together, Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, and on and on. So we have to understand, start with the big guys, knock them back, knock back the fungal overgrowth. And in the treatment, this is the tricky part, because if we use natural things, there is more of a broad spectrum where they will hit different types of fungi. If we are just using drugs, pharmaceuticals, antifungal drugs, they can be helpful, but they're not the end-all be-all cure because they're more narrow. So for diflucan, it might treat some species of candida, but it may not treat many of the other types of fungus that may be growing in our central nervous system. So that's why it's really important. You've got to work with someone. If you want to recover, if you want your life back, I just want to let you know that I have an amazing masterclass training. Please watch it. It will be in the link below. You can also just say, Pam, send me your masterclass training and I'll put it in your comment. But in that masterclass training, it gives you more information about this, Rob, so that you can really start to begin to understand these infections and how they're causing symptoms, disease symptoms in your body. And when you treat them, that's how people are recovering. And that's how I've been able to live 28 years free of multiple sclerosis. We have many wellness champions that have recovered, many that are in the works. And this truly is what works. And yeah, it's challenging to treat them because we don't know exactly which ones, because there, like I said, 400 types of fungi, but we know fungus is an issue, and you treat it, and then that gets better, and parasites, etc. Hello, Dana and Charlotte and Patricia. You've been diagnosed with MSA, same symptoms of MS, and Parkinson's, getting pretty tired of this drunk feeling all day. The drunk feeling can be as simple as when we have these infections in our body. For example, fungus. We know that it's a massive producer of alcohol. So there's something, it's a medical term, it's called autobury. And this medical term means that you have so much alcohol produced from the fungal infection that you are drunk from it. So you may not have had any alcohol, but it produces a lot of alcohol, so you'll feel drunk. And that is called autobury. So it's an actual medical term. But there are, like even just with Candida albicans, there's over 70 different poisons that Candida will produce. Acetaldehyde, that is a hangover chemical. That's the chemical that makes us feel like we were hit by a truck. Formaldehyde, and it goes on and on. Different types of hormone type chemicals. So, if the pharmaceuticals, this is another thing that we need to just consider. If you have infections in your brain, right? You've got fungus, you've got these nematodes and bacterial infections. Does it make sense to suppress your immune system if you have infection? So if you have a war going on, does it make sense to lock up some of your military and prevent them from fighting in the war? No, because what happens is the infections grow faster. They have nothing holding them back. Other microbes move in and start to cause other infections. So this is why we have to really consider the types of treatments that we are going to use to recover. And that's why when we have infections and we suppress our immune system, we don't get better. We actually live with these infections and we get sicker and sicker and sicker, and we still become disabled in time. So Rob, you started a 10-pass ozone, and you did 2 passes, and you did 2 pass and 6 pass so far. Keep me updated. Awesome. Remember that it's fine to do the ozone, absolutely fine, the 10 pass, but I don't know that it's going to be strong enough to treat the gut, like to treat your intestines. It's going to definitely be hitting the gut or your blood really well, knocking back the infection in your blood. You should have some symptom improvement, but remember, you want to treat the gut more aggressively, because that's really where 90% of all the infection is sitting. Thank you so much for the love. So please make sure that you share this study with other people that you know are looking for answers. Please share this research with your doctor, with your neurologist, with your GP, with people around you, because the only way that things are going to change is we have to get this evidence out. And you guys are the champions. You guys are the trailblazers. All right, so hello, Marianne and Celia. The problem with going to a doctor and trying to get a confirmation for Candida, it's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. We know that we all have Candida in our body, even healthy people. Like there's a lot of people that get yeast infections, Candida infections, but they don't have any disease, right? They have a little bit of fungal overgrowth in the GI tract, maybe in the vaginal tract, but it hasn't moved into our brain cells, into the nucleus of our brain cells. So if we have it already, a lot of doctors won't test for it. They don't, it's really hard for them to determine if we have a Candida infection. It's kind of a waste of money. If you have a lot of symptoms of fungal overgrowth, which I share would be things like maybe you get dandruff, maybe you have fingernail or toenail infections, maybe you've had yeast infections in the past, maybe you've had things like jock itch or athlete's foot or ringworm. There are things like sinus issues, like a lot of snoring and stuffiness and maybe getting sinus infections. It loves to sit there. Lumpy breasts, for if you've been nursing children, and you may find that you get a milk duct that plugs and it just goes back and forth. I had that back in the day when I was nursing, and it's very painful, and it was from fungus. How did I know? Because I tried to treat bacteria, didn't work. I took 1 shot of diflucan and it knocked the fungus back that I could nurse for another 6 months. So it can be rashes on our body, many different symptoms in our, especially the constipation and gas. And that is hard because sometimes the parasites also give us a constipation and gas, but for sure fungus is a big one. It's really linked hugely with cancer also. Fungus is a big part of cancer. So if you have the symptoms, and I have that all listed in my program when I work with students, then that is a very good indication that you have a lot of fungal overgrowth, and then you need to treat it. And remember, Celia, that it's not just the Candida that is the problem. So a doctor, if you get them convinced to give you something to treat Candida, it may be helpful if it is a lot of it in your body and possibly in your central nervous system, but it may not be helpful because diflucan and nystatin, they only treat certain fungi. So then what some of the doctors are doing is they're mixing 2 different drugs. They might mix diflucan with Sporanox, they might mix diflucan with Sporanox and nystatin, or they might mix diflucan with amphotericin B. But there again, you're working with healthcare providers and making sure it's safe, because some of these drugs that go through your whole blood system, they will definitely, or they can impact your liver. We found that they're quite well tolerated, but you have to work with a professional because they would be prescribing it anyhow. So, and there again, are the drugs the magic bullet? I'm not convinced yet, right? Because some of my students are going either way. We traditionally have worked more with the herbs. They work really well. There may be a time that you bring in the pharmaceuticals to kind of, towards the end when people are a lot stronger, just to knock it back further. But what's been my success is just living a certain way, and that's how I teach in the Live Disease-Free Academy, and learning how to manage your microbes, because it's, you're always being introduced to different microbes. Yes, Zeta, that's a really good point. So she's just wondering, being exposed to lots of fungus in a building or others might trigger this. Next week, that's going to be my topic. I'm going to talk about how living in a moldy home can make you sick. So if we have mold in our home or in our workplace, we're inhaling all these mycotoxins. It really suppresses our immune system, and it causes fungus to grow faster in our body. We can even have mold growing in our body. There are many different types of fungi. So yes, it's a very significant part of becoming sick. Some of my students lived in a moldy home for a few years before they came down with neurological disease. And Rob, you're also going to do a laser IV. That's totally fine. I think that would be great. And Angie, I know that with Rob because he's a wellness champion. So I know all about Rob. I don't like to normally give advice, but he is somebody that is a wellness champion. I know him very well. And he is treating infections well. Thank you for all the love. So Angie, so how do you get rid of fungal overgrowth? All right. So I have, like, watch my masterclass training because it gives you steps. And I have tons of research, or not research, I have tons of videos on YouTube. I have a book called Become a Wellness Champion. So that's for just general information. But you have to know that if you want to recover, it's quite complicated. And it's taken me years to figure this out, and myself and studying. I have a science degree, so I'm constantly taking courses and finding the best and quickest way to treat these infections. So you have to work with somebody to treat these infections. There are some great clinics out there, not a lot of them, but there's a couple of them. And when you go to them, it's like they're talking to you, they say, we know you're loaded with infection and we're going to work to figure out which infections are making you sick. But you have to understand they cost at least $30,000 to $80,000 for up to 3 months. Some of my students have done testing of $6,000 to $8,000 to $10,000, which I don't feel is necessary. You know, like if you had loads and loads of money that you didn't know what to do with, you could do that. But the benefit that you get from it, I don't feel that that's necessary. But you do have to find somebody, like you can work with us. We have a plan. So that's what we have, is the Live Disease Free Academy, is a plan where you do most of the work yourself, and it's the most cost effective. But there may be a time when you'd like to reach out to an integrative healthcare provider because you might want to be tested to see, you know, will ivermectin, you know, what will help me to treat these parasites the best, or which antifungals I want to use some of the drugs, include them. So then they're not going to prescribe antiparasitic drugs. They're not going to prescribe antifungal drugs unless they have rationale, unless they have a reason. So they have to test you. We don't have good blood work tests. We don't have good stool analysis tests. They miss pretty much all of this. So we go by symptoms. And then also, you know, if you have a lot of symptoms of parasites, you start treating them. And we usually like to start with more natural herbs, herb blends, and then you work to the fungus. And you kind of go back with fungus and parasites, you know, knock them back, knock them back, knock them back, knock them back, until you feel better and better and better. And then sometimes the Borrelia is not an issue anymore, but sometimes we have to start to knock back the bacterial infections also. The nice thing with the natural is that some of the herbs like wormwood and others like oil of oregano, they will treat, they'll knock back fungus, they'll knock back certain parasites, and they will knock back also the Lyme disease. But on their own, they're not enough. Not when you have chronic disease, right? When you have chronic disease, you've got to, number one, we first stop feeding the infections. This is in the system that you'll be, when you watch my masterclass training, you've got to follow an eating plan so you're not feeding those critters so much. The next step is you have to support your body in many different ways. The third step is to look at your health history, to look at your symptoms, and start to build a plan of attack. And then we start, if you've got symptoms of parasites, that's where you start. Because you want to get rid of the bigger culprits because they cause bigger symptoms and they need to be taken care of. Then you work with fungus and then with bacterial infections. And the viruses are usually not a problem, but there are some natural things that will help if you're dealing with viral infections. But it's usually as you're dealing with the bigger issue, the viruses are, your immune system starts to take over and you don't have issues with that anymore. And you're doing a PEMF mat. Awesome. Way to go, Rob. Hello, Natalie. And my husband heard this podcast, that mushroom expert speaking. So I personally, I know about lion's mane and some of my students have used it, and I don't personally recommend it and I wouldn't take it. So lion's mane, I'm going to backtrack for a minute. Some of the mushrooms have nutrients in them that are really health promoting. So for example, there's a class of nutrition called glyconutrients, and some of the mushrooms contain glyconutrients. But when you're taking lion's mane, when you're just taking the supplement, you're also taking the fungal components, the building blocks from that mushroom. When you're loaded with fungus and you're eating that, then you have a lot of building blocks to support the fungal overgrowth in your body. So that is why I feel that it's safer to not take fungal supplements while you're dealing with chronic disease. And I really believe that. So it is so challenging to treat these infections. It really is. So we have to use as much strategy. We have to have a baseline. So I would never take any fungal. I don't even eat button mushrooms because of my history I know of with fungal overgrowth. You can get lots and lots of really immune supporting, health promoting things from other supplements that are not. So I personally would not take the lion's mane. Thank you so much for all the love. And the pulse electrum, the PEMF mat is great, Rob. So Angie, you're trying to find a good integrative doctor or a functional medicine doctor in Lancaster. So many in the list. So Angie, I'm sorry, I don't know the last name. I'm not sure if you are a wellness champion or not, but if you are not a wellness champion, then you have to be really careful when you're looking for an integrative doctor, because a lot of them, they mean well, right? They have a heart of gold and they are on the right track. They're working in the holistic, right? They're looking for non-toxic. They really want to help you to get well, but they've studied in school. And most of them do not understand these infections this well. So a lot of people that find me, they have spent $100,000 to $300,000 on their health working with different integrative doctors, naturopaths, functional medicine doctors. They've done things like CCSVI, they've done maybe stem cell, not the transplant, but just the stem cell therapy maybe once a year, and they're still sick because they haven't focused on the infections. So what I do is I teach my students how to find a healthcare provider that will be on the same page as them and how to work with them. So we work together in a respectful manner, and you first have to learn this stuff yourself so that if they say, well, let's try this, let's do this, and you're like, no thanks, let's just focus on this. And that will save you thousands of dollars, and that'll save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration for sure. So when you're treating the infection, so for example, when I'm referring a student to, let's say, a naturopath that we have in our area who is, he's very, like, number one, he's been trained under Dr. Klinghardt. He knows how to do advanced muscle testing. He understands infections really well. So my students will go in and out, $150, maybe $200 the first time, just because he needs to get to know them, go through their health history. But it's just quick testing. Okay, yes, ivermectin works. No, this doesn't work. Yes, wormwood works. Okay, here's your protocol. And so that is as simple as it gets. So you don't need to do all these other things. You can, but I'm telling you that the benefit is 99% of the time not worth it. Heavy metal detox, absolutely, but there are safer ways you can do heavy metal detox. But if you want to do that with them, that's fine. How can you become a coach, Lakey? The first thing is you should go through the process. You should, you can just reach out to us for sure, because I am going to be starting to train up coaches in the next little while. I have the curriculum ready. I have everything ready. It's just that we have been growing so fast. We're in over 10 countries now. This is not an MS. Like, I am talking to a lot of MS people, but really this is how to be the director of your health, how to manage those microbes that live in your body, how to keep the bad ones down, how to keep the good ones up, how to live in this world where we have so many different poisons and toxins that are invisible that we don't know about. But if you're interested in becoming a coach, reach out to us for sure. And that would just be info@livediseasefree.com. info@livediseasefree.com. And Angie, yes, and this mushroom expert's name is Paul. It doesn't matter. This is the hard thing. I've been in this field for 28 years, and I have seen almost everything that there is to see. And there are a ton of experts. Yes, he may know a lot about mushrooms, but has he helped people recover from chronic disease? Probably not. And so that's the key, is that there are so many different supplements that in theory could be beneficial for us. Like if we have mitochondrial dysfunction, let's say we have methylation defects, etc., we could be buying all of these different supplements. But what my students and what I found is that a lot of it is a waste of money. So let's put it this way. The lion's mane that you bought is not going to treat the infections. It's not. So why not take your money and use it towards something that will treat the infections? Or if you're going to take a supplement, take some basic plant source vitamins and minerals that your body needs to run properly, because we're deficient because of these infections. But that's as far as I would go. Hello, Christy, and hello, Laura Lee and Lisa. You've been looking for me. Awesome. And Haiti. Yes, as I mentioned, the biggest out of balance part is the gut. So when we have the infections in the central nervous system, as this amazing study has shared with us, if you're just joining us right now, make sure that you come back and look at the replay, and I will have all the links posted for the study and also for our MS, the evidence that multiple sclerosis is an infectious disease, and also the masterclass training. For those of you that are like, Pam, I don't want any more information. I just want to get well. I want a plan. I want a step-by-step plan. Then watch my masterclass training, because that's how the wellness champions are recovering from not just MS, but other chronic diseases. Yes, I will send you the link, Kim, as soon as we're done here. Just see if there's any last quick questions. Yes, I will send you the link. So just post in there if you want the link, and I'll put it, I'll reply to your comment and I'll send you the link. Anything you can remember for getting started fighting this, the link to the masterclass training for sure. Because it's the days of taking an antibiotic for 2 weeks or taking a killing agent, it would be so lovely. I would just love to do that. Just say, take this pill, you know, it'll treat everything. It's going to treat the fungus, it's going to treat the parasites, it's going to treat the Lyme, right? And take a probiotic and you're good. It's not that simple. So in the masterclass training, I explain all the steps you need to take to get to recover. Hello, Roberta and Susan. How do you test and treat for all these infections? As I mentioned, we don't have good blood work. We don't have good stool analysis tests. The way that we really test for them, and that's not really test, it's like we look at very specific surveys that I've created. So there are very specific symptoms for fungal overgrowth in the body. There's very specific symptoms for parasites, and even very specific symptoms for these nematodes that they're finding in the central nervous system of people that have multiple sclerosis, and very specific symptoms for Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, and all of these different infections. So that's where we start, is really going through these surveys and saying, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, but I just checked off 10 symptoms of parasites. I think I better start with that first. Or I had no idea that I could have Lyme disease, but look at, I've checked off 20 symptoms of Borrelia. That's the first eye-opening part for you. And then we start to treat them and knock them back. And if you want to use something stronger like a drug, the only way we know at this time to really test, and I shouldn't say the only way, but the most cost-effective way, is to use the ART or AMA. So that is like an advanced muscle testing, and I teach that to the students. You don't do it yourself, but I help them find healthcare providers that will test them. And all they're really doing is, if they've used all the natural supplements and the herbs, and they've really treated far along, and they're feeling a lot better, then they may want to introduce possibly, and this is where we're learning, like some students aren't. Some people are just recovering from oxygen therapies and herbs, etc. But some people do want to use the antiparasitic pharmaceuticals and antifungal pharmaceuticals. All right, so no doctor ever helps. Ramona, that's not totally true. There are doctors that they just haven't been trained in this, right? I've got a tickle in my throat. So the really big thing is that there are doctors in our areas that are open and willing to work with us. We have to find them, we have to educate them, but it is totally doable, right? And you just have to know what to do, and that's what I teach in the academy. And Rebecca, that's also how that's what I teach in the academy. So how many of these symptoms may I have in the master? Yeah, I'll be giving you the masterclass link. Valerie, hello, Elizabeth. Will the drugs, they have a lot of adverse effects, absolutely. You have to understand there's a big difference between the disease-modifying drugs that are for chronic disease, like they're like suppressing our immune system. You take them forever, and they keep switching them because they're so toxic. There's a big difference between that and using very short-term specific pharmaceuticals to treat specific infections. Very big difference. And you have them all: Candida, bronchitis, sinus infection, shingles, MS, and Lyme. I am so sorry, Anne. There is a better way. You really have to take a different path. This is your life. You only live once. You've got to take charge of your health, and I'll help you to do that. So Tara, you believe that that is what's causing your symptoms, and you have MS symptoms. It was Lyme all along. So just remember that it's not only Lyme. We're seeing that these nematodes, what's so crazy, go back to my old videos, not old, but recent videos on Live Disease Free channel, YouTube or Facebook, and look at the replays. There's a 6-part series. Look at the parasite section, because what we're seeing is that they're finding nematodes in every single spinal fluid and brain, but especially in the spinal fluid, tons of these nematodes. And they cause symptoms in domestic animals. They've known this for 100 years almost, that when these nematodes get in the central nervous system of domestic animals, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis. So it was in every single brain of the spinal fluid of a patient that has died of MS. They found these nematodes. Huge finding. So that means that maybe diflucan and sporanox and amphotericin is not going to treat some of the symptoms. We might have to do things like ivermectin and praziquantel, and also some oxidizing agents, so some of the oxygen therapies on top. So what we're seeing in recovery is not just herbs. It's not just drugs. We have to use a combination. You have to use strategy, but you keep chiseling and chiseling and chiseling away at them, and they become less and less and less, and it takes months, not years, to recover. And it's worth it. It's so worth it. So when you take the natural meds, will it kill the good ones? That's a really good comment. When you take the herbs, it can impact the good microbes, not as devastating as the antibiotics, and that's why we're constantly rebuilding the good. And the best way that I know how to do that is with the raw, unpasteurized sauerkraut. It's very well tolerated. Make sure that if you are really sick that you start off slow and increase it. But it is loaded with, the homemade is the best, absolutely. But if you can't make it homemade, they even have it in Costco now. But it has to be raw, and it has so many more microbes than the bottles that you would get in the drugstores or the health food stores, the probiotic bottles. But yes, you have to constantly be building up the good as you're knocking back the bad. Good, you're gonna totally dissect this video, very informative. I'm so glad that this helped you. This is just the start of a whole new journey for you. I'm so super excited. Hello, Denise. Yes, Candida, bronchitis, Lyme, shingles, bladder infection. I'm so sorry. You need to implement, you have to learn these strategies and implement them and take your life back. You're so welcome, Anne. I think that's it. I'm gonna let you guys go because we're almost at an hour here. You're so very welcome. Last one here. Hi, Pam. Will this help with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? Absolutely. In my experience, like in the academy, I put together some training videos that are bonus videos. We go over that in the last lesson in Module 9. And for years and years and years, I've known that there's a really huge link between fungal overgrowth and cancers. That is very, very solid. But there are other microbes that can cause, so they're finding other parasites in cells, sometimes protozoa in cells that are possibly linked with cancer. So number one, cancer is caused by infection for sure. And as you treat the bad and build back up the good, and especially focusing on fungus and really understanding what are the symptoms of fungus in the body and how do I successfully treat it. What breaks my heart is when I run into people, if I'm traveling and let's say there's a taxi driver and he's like, yeah, I just finished a whole bunch of chemotherapy for my cancer, and he's drinking a smoothie and he's got a banana in there and a whole bunch of fruit in there, and I'm like, you don't understand, but it's caused by infection, and a lot of these infections, fungus loves sugar. It doesn't care if it gets it from a banana, if it gets it from fruit. So these poor people, they're thinking they're doing all these great things with all these smoothies, and they're just loading up their body with natural sugar, feeding the problem. So once you've done the chemo and all the treatments, your immune system is lower than it was before. Yeah, it knocked back some of the infection too because it's so toxic, but now all of a sudden you're feeding the infections and they're growing back, and your immune system is so weak because it's gone through chemo, and they're not telling us to rebuild our microbes. They're not telling us to rebuild our immune system. They're not telling us that even banana sugar will feed fungus, will feed the cancer. Our local hospital even knows that sugar feeds cancer, but they're not educating people on any of this. It's just come in, take this drug, see you later, or have the surgery, see you later. That's not their mandate. That's not their deal, right? We're really out of balance. It is medical and medicine, and I'm not against it, right? Because sometimes we have to use medicines that will really help us to recover, but it has to be short-term, very specific, and always benefit is higher than the risk, right? What's the normal recovery time, Rob? It really depends on the person. There is a very small percentage of people that take my program. It's a 3-month program, and they're symptom-free in 2 to 3 months. Most people, it takes a few more months because and it depends on how well they implement. I'm a teacher by trade. I was, 14 years teaching in our local school district. So it's just like in every class, you've got A students, B students, and C students. Some of my students are on 15 medications. They have no support at home. They're on disability. They go slower. Other people, maybe it's not only that they're just not as sick, but for example, Terry Kiley, she was in a scooter for 8 years. She was on 3 medications, and in 90 days, she was out of her scooter, off all her meds. She was starting to do squats in the doorways, back on her exercise bike, pedaling away. Her balance was back. So I can't really determine. It's just the plan is laid out, and you just have to follow all the steps. And as you successfully treat the infections, that's when people recover. So is it the eating plan? No, the eating plan is important, so we don't keep feeding the bugs, so we have better success at treating them. Then we have to support the body so that we can treat them better. But it's really in treating these infections and following, like if we keep feeding the microbes, then the treatment is a lot worse. And if our environment, if we have a lot of mold in our environment, we have a lot of radiation. So in the past videos, I've talked about radiation. The wireless radiation makes these bugs grow 600 times faster. I'm going to be talking about mold next Wednesday, how that makes these infections grow, makes us sick, and then heavy metals in our body. So you just have to know all the steps, and you get to work at your own pace. And like I said, I have super keeners that plow through it in 2 to 3 months, and they're pretty much symptom-free, but it's always a small percentage, right? And then I would say more like 4 to 6 months to 8 months, depending on how well you implement. And yes, I will give all of you guys the link, I promise. All right, so I think that is it. So a lot of doctors are pushing Ocrevus. Yeah, I'll end with this one. It breaks my heart. You have to understand Ocrevus is chemotherapy. It's wiping out your B cells. I had one student I just was talking with a few days ago, and her neurologist basically said, I want to put you on Ocrevus. And she's like, well, I read it wipes out your B cells. Those are a division of your immune system. And he's like, well, most people do fine without them. And I'm just like, no. So Ocrevus is chemotherapy. It increases your risk of cancer. Does it make sense to wipe out a division of your immune system when you have tons of infection in your body, in your central nervous system, and in different parts of your body? No, it does not make sense. So it breaks my heart, but it is really popular, and it's completely wrong. And I'm not blaming the doctors. They don't know. They don't know this information, and that's why you guys have to take this out to the world. You have to help. That's the only way things are going to change, is you've got to share this video. You've got to share the research, share the livediseasefree.com/MS-infection. So my Live Disease Free website, and then just put a /MS-infections. Tons and tons of research showing MS is caused by infection. So you guys are the champions. You're going to help us bring change. And I love the wellness champions, and you guys can be a wellness champion. You have to watch my masterclass training. After that, then you can register if you're ready. If you're ready to go to work. If you're not ready, then don't. Just listen to all my free stuff. But if you're ready, you can book a time to chat with me, and you can get started right away, and you can join our class. We've got students from over 10 countries in that class. There are at least 70, there's over 70 students in there right now, and the conversations that we have are truly amazing. We have much deeper conversations than we do on this because they have so much more background. So okay, there's more questions. I'm gonna have to let you guys go. We're at over an hour. I'm gonna let you go. I'll be back next week, Wednesday, to share with you why it is so important to make sure you do not live in a moldy environment and you do not have a moldy work environment. So until next Wednesday, take care. Make sure to look for the link. I will put the masterclass training link so that if you are sick of this disease and you want to recover, then go ahead and watch that and reach out to me. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Hope you guys have an awesome week. Take care and bye-bye for now.